confusing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
All the people that have gone out there against the mainstream media and said, you're going to call us racist, you're going to call us potential Timothy McVeighs, fuck you. War.
Immensely seductive. Quite sure he's right. An obsessionally neurotic. Pretty dangerous, in fact.
Do you mean you doubt your powers to convince him?
Worse than that. What I'm afraid of is his power to convince me.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
Say it! Say it!
All right, I'll say it.
We're talking about putting a manifestly irresponsible man on national television.
Sweetheart, be reasonable.
It is Tuesday, December 10th, 2024, the 1420th day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. This is my second shot at starting the show today. I did the whole intro before hitting go live, and so it didn't go live, and I've now just done my whole intro twice in a row. At least you guys only heard it once. Now, I don't know what you did for that 5 minutes. I bet you just thought, where is he? Do I have the time on this show right? Wasn't it supposed to start by now? Maybe it was. It definitely was. That was 100% my fault. It was not a technological error or anything of the sort. It was just me messing up. All right. Well, we're off to a very professional beginning. Let's keep it professional. We'll keep it classy. If you can be as professional as the President of the United States of America, I think that's all you ever have to do. And so let's go to the fake president, and let's see if we can keep up with his standards.
Well, one of the things that's going on here, they just turned off my, I'm going to go down. I lost the electricity here. But anyway, one of the things we found is that, you know, we invented this, the computer chip, size of the tip of your little finger.
Yeah. Just can't get enough of our boy Blue. I don't know if you there's a Leslie Nielsen movie, and I'm having a really hard time remembering what it is. It's one of those days where I have to do like 3 straight hold for processings as I figure out how to retrieve a movie clip that I absolutely have to play. I can't let it go now. Because it is a spoof. I think it's called Wrongfully Accused? I think it might be wrongfully accused. But anyhow, there is a little parody on the kind of revelation scene in the movie Usual Suspects. I think it's Spy Hard. I think that's what it is. And Joe Biden, or whatever is playing Joe Biden, just reminded me of that. He basically did the same thing. And I have to play this now. Oh, no, it was wrongfully accused. All right, here we go. Thank goodness I found this. But not thank goodness I messed it up 3 times on the way to finding it. Here we are.
You know, I've never seen you around here, Mr.
Buzzin' Frog, born on the shores of the Uralaba River in Rapala. A couple of husky jerks brought me to Slimy Slug, South Dakota. You know, up there by Timberdoodle, the Zebco brothers, Smithwick and Salty Dog Shrimp. I can't go fishing this afternoon. I've got a big meeting over at Minstrom. I'd forget my genitals if they went superglued in between my legs. Water skiing accident. Freeze, Harrison. Don't move.
You know, I've never seen you around here, Mr.
Buzzin' Frog, born on the shores of the Uralaba River in Rapala, up there by Timberdoodle. Salty Dog Shrimp. I've got a big meeting over at Minstrom.
It's the greatest. That is, if you ask me, exactly what our fake president sounded like. Just right there. And now that you've seen it, you can let me know if you agree. Here, we'll do whatever is inhabiting the form of Joe Biden once more.
One of the things that's going on here is they just turned off my, I'm going to go vomit. I lost the electricity here. Anyway, one of the things we found is that, you know, we invented the computer chip, size of the tip of your little finger.
I don't know. Maybe it's stupid. Maybe it's just me. Anyway, I guess it's 1:15 the hour now. We've gotten a lot accomplished here. We've really chopped a lot of wood here. All in a day's work. Do you want to talk about some news? Let's talk about some news, shall we? Where did my news go? There we are. We will hold no longer for processing. Everything should have processed by now. That was me yesterday deciding that I needed to upgrade my internet speed. So if I used to be choppy and I'm still choppy after tomorrow, then you can definitely let me know it's time to switch over to the Starlink that I acquired but never actually set up. Whatever. So Donald Trump yesterday announced the selection of Harmeet Dillon to be Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division. Now, the Civil Rights Division would depend on all the civil rights legislation passed on the back of the 14th Amendment. So the Justice Department shouldn't actually be doing any of that because there shouldn't be a whole book of federal crimes created to protect civil rights after the passage of the 14th Amendment during Reconstruction. While someone like George P. Fletcher from Columbia Law School, who wrote Our Secret Constitution, while someone like him would think all of this is wonderful, in fact, the Civil War was fought specifically to create a new constitution, as he explicitly outlines in that book. He would think this is great. He would think that it's good that we have this entire federal code, criminal code, so that people can be pursued criminally if they are failing to conform with the subjective demands put in place by the 14th Amendment and the legal precedent and the law to follow the implementation of the 14th Amendment. So if we are to properly get all the way back to the original Constitution, removing all of the amendments past the 10th, which has to be a goal, at least a waypoint on the way to fixing America how it's supposed to be, we got to get rid of all that. And no, it's not about anything to do with race or anything like that. You can't fight a civil war to overthrow the Constitution and replace it with an inverted version of itself. And that is what Fletcher argues happened. It's hard to see any way in which he's wrong. So he goes through the history of it. He goes through the Gettysburg Address and how all of this is to support taking the republic, turning it into a democracy, removing the priority on liberty, replacing it with a priority on equality, and taking the focus off of the sovereign individual and shifting it to the good of the state. Okay. And so to fight a civil war, to institute that, and then push through these amendments without the state's approval, enforcing it on all those states, forcing them back into the Union. You have inverted the Constitution and then set up all this criminal law to go at, so that the federal government, the centralized and ever expanding federal government, can create crimes that it can imprison the people for committing, even though the people do not consent to this government. Okay. We cannot consent to this government if we don't have legitimate elections. It is obvious we don't have legitimate elections. Therefore, there can be no government of consent. Therefore, the idea that the government would then attempt to imprison the people is the greatest usurpation of the people's power anyone could ever imagine. That is an authoritarian, totalitarian state. We are in a global communist regime, and we are in a communist state. Just is what it is. And, you know, we don't have to like run around with our hair on fire about it. We can simply choose not to recognize the legitimacy of the government, as Thomas Jefferson demanded of us, but people still can't come to terms with. They're like, what do you mean? Do we need to win fake elections for the next 30 or 40 years so that we can put enough congressmen in place so that they can vote to pass a resolution that says the people 40 years ago did not recognize the legitimacy of their government? No, that's not the solution. The solution is simply say that government's not legitimate. And whenever anybody else says we need to do this or that with laws or voting or rules or compliance or any of it, say, nah, nope, not until they can prove their legitimacy to me. I don't have to grovel for state power. We just don't have to do it. Thomas Jefferson literally demanded it of us. And instead we're like, no. Ronald Reagan said. All right. Yeah, sure he did. All right. So Trump says, so anyway, the point is, by the way, before I get into this statement, this whole tangent was based on, premising this particular Trump statement here. There shouldn't be a civil rights division of the Justice Department. There shouldn't be a Justice Department. Okay. But there definitely shouldn't be a civil rights division. And so whatever Harmeet Dillon is being appointed to do shouldn't be a real thing. Now, none of this has happened yet. We got a couple more months to wait and see what Donald Trump actually intends to do. And there are certainly people who I imagine are on the good team to some large degree who believe that we need to replace the malign foreign power occupying our government with a benign domestic power occupying the same government. The problem is that the government is a construct of that malign foreign power. And there is no benign version of this government, okay? Without tearing down the sprawling federal bureaucracy, we don't have a government. The government has not gained in legitimacy. Donald Trump has a public mandate, but that's about as far as we can go on any of it. Any of it. So there should not be an assistant attorney general for the civil rights division of the Department of Justice under the executive branch. That shouldn't be a thing that exists. Therefore, no one should be appointed to it. Therefore, when Trump appoints someone to it, to the extent that's real, that's a problem. Okay? Now, Donald Trump, again, has been the catalyst for the Great Awakening and the America First and MAGA movement. So Donald Trump gets the leeway that Donald Trump's accomplishments and commitment demand. But nobody else gets that. And certainly not Harmeet Dillon, who supported Ron DeSantis in the fake primaries. Now, Harmeet Dillon is also probably leading very good and productive lawsuits. But the idea that she's going to win those, she was working on the big tech censorship lawsuits. Now, I don't know if she's involved in Trump's big tech censorship lawsuits. Let me just check and see if the machine knows. It's Harmeet Dillon. I should have checked this before, and I meant to last night, but, such is life. In Trump's big tech censorship class action lawsuits, Harmeet Dillon has been actively involved in legal battles against what she and many conservatives perceive as censorship by big tech. Not what I asked. Represented clients. Notably, she filed lawsuits against Google, claiming the company redirected Republican emails to spam folders, blah, 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 in her new position. This does not say. Maybe a better question is, who filed Trump's class action lawsuits against big tech? Because Harmeet Dillon did file the lawsuit on behalf of DC Drano, one Rogan O'Handley. I think it was just the America First. I think it was America First Legal. Although the machine is not telling me. So, I wouldn't want to. Damn. Okay, let's move on from that. I will find out, or if someone in the chat wants to nail it down for me, by all means, go ahead, but we're going to push on. So Harmeet Dillon ran a very strange op on Twitter. She was following a bunch of people, including me, but she was following a bunch of the people in the Ron op, and they're not all people, and that's the problem. Now, I don't think anybody spent more time with the Ron DeSantis info op from, late 2022 to early 2024 than I did. Okay. I don't think anybody knows that better than I do. And I would be surprised if there's someone who does. And I'm not saying that to toot my own horn. I just spent a lot of time on that. And we spent a lot of time on it on the show. And put aside the Ron could be kayfabe. I get it. I understand. Maybe all the people around him are kayfabe too. Thomas Massey and Chip Roy and all of the people in the media, people like Harmeet Dillon, et cetera. Okay. But there were a lot of bots in that op, and that op seems to me to have all the same characteristics as the NAFO op, which is the North Atlantic Fellas Organization, which was the online harassment op to support the Ukraine effort. Adam Kinzinger had NAFO on his Twitter profile forever. Maybe he still does. Hey, maybe Adam Kinzinger is an op as well, and all good. This is not about trying to condemn these people. I don't care about the personalities. Okay. I don't care about white hat or black hat. I don't care if they're good guys or bad guys. I care about what they do and how we consider it along different levels from different perspectives, and then how we react to it. Okay. So all I'm telling you is what actually happened. There were a bunch of bots in that op that would run the same sorts of scripts with the same sorts of attack points and pile in their friends at the same time. It was very coordinated, very repetitive, very patterned, which is why I don't engage as though they are humans and I might be able to change their minds. That's not what they are. That's not what most entities online are. Now, there might be some people out there you can engage in a polite conversation and get somewhere, but the chances are very low. And the chances are far better that the entity you're talking to is either a bot, which is just an algorithmic or AI entity on there that's just going to spit a script at you and react and try to get you to react and waste all day, all your time on reacting to it while you grow more emotional and have more trouble putting the thing down. Okay. It makes the threat of the political point of view the bot represents seem that much more serious, even though it's not really serious at all. So a bunch of these bots are always flooding in to support the influencers, the actual people in that info op, and you can watch their patterns. And it was very strange because people like Harmeet Dillon and Thomas Massey and a number of others were following not only all the Ron DeSantis influencers and interacting with them regularly and reposting their stuff regularly, people like Miranda Devine as well from the New York Post, they were also following all of those bot accounts, which, and I cannot prove this, okay, but just from knowing how the social media stuff works, from time in social media management to dealing with these sorts of info ops, to just observing things, there are generally people targeting those little bot swarms and those little troll and shill armies, because sometimes it's real people who aren't acting as their authentic selves. They're representing a viewpoint. They're doing a script and they're getting paid to waste your time and try to get an emotional reaction out of you. And that's why I tell people they sound vaccinated, watch them respond, try to gauge their responses. And then, when they get stuck on retard, they get the GIF. And that's it. And at that point, there's no more point in engaging, which is why, by the way, if you follow me on social media, it is so frustrating to watch real people get involved with those accounts in a serious way after they already see the spinning GIF. Okay. Those aren't people worth engaging. So it's very strange that someone like Harmeet Dillon would be following all of those accounts unless she was part of whatever op was directing that activity or monitoring, right? We can look at it from both sides. And again, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on Harmeet Dillon. Also, Harmeet Dillon was the person who ran against Ronna Romney McDaniel for RNC chair in early 2023, I think that was. And then Mike Lindell jumped in there to run interference, I believe, on Harmeet. And, it doesn't matter whether you like Ronna McDaniel or whether you like Harmeet Dillon or whether you like Mike Lindell or you like or don't like any of them. Irrelevant to figure out, oh, I don't like that guy. I hope that the other person was the good guy in that situation, or you just decide that the other person must be because this person is so bad. That is not generally a worthwhile decision point. It might be information among other information. It can be valuable information when reaching a decision, but it shouldn't be the only thing. So Harmeet was in there and was supported by all the people who eventually ended up in the Ron op. Now, why is that? Did they want her running the RNC so that she could push the RNC in the direction of Ron? It's a good question. I don't know the answer. I don't know what's in her heart. I don't know what the motivations are. I know that Trump nominated her to a post that shouldn't exist and has worked with her law group before. And I think that he actually nominated someone else from her law group, okay, in this cycle. Harmeet Dillon also in California tried to, as the chair of the California RNC, I believe, attempted to pass a rule that made proportional, I think. I'm looking this up. Okay. Harmeet Dillon in June 2023, alongside California GOP Chair Jessica Milan Patterson and RNC committee member Sean Steele, proposed a new set of delegate selection rules aimed at making the California GOP primary more competitive. This proposal included a significant shift to proportional delegate allocation, allowing candidates who finished lower in the vote count to claim more delegates than they would under the traditional winner-takes-all system. This change was intended to benefit candidates who could gather support across a broader base rather than just securing a majority in a single district. Now, is that principally a good thing? Maybe it is. Primaries are stupid. Parties are stupid. Neither should exist. So I can't get behind it fully. Maybe it's better than the situation we have now. But regardless, and take this as you will, maybe Trump was just playing kayfabe against a policy he liked. The proposal faced immediate backlash from Donald Trump's campaign team, who viewed it as potentially detrimental to Trump's chances in the primary. Now, having a fake primary, do you care about the detrimental chances? Probably not. The motion was basically abandoned. The effort to get this done was essentially abandoned. And but at the time, it was seen to be a direct effort to help Ron DeSantis, which she seemed to be doing. She followed all the people in the Ron DeSantis op, including the bot and shill accounts. And all those Ron people got mad at Trump for supporting Ronna Romney McDaniel in that RNC chair election. It's all one thing. Now, if it's all a pro-Trump red team op, all good. I'd be more than happy to be like, hey guys, you were running it so well that you even had me fooled. And I would apologize to each and every one of them. Okay. But awfully hard to believe that's the case. So Trump has named Harmeet Dillon as the person who will serve as Assistant Attorney General at the Civil Rights Division. He says, I'm pleased to nominate Harmeet Dillon as Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Justice. Throughout her career, Harmeet has stood up consistently to protect our cherished civil liberties, including taking on big tech for censoring our free speech, representing Christians who were prevented from praying together during COVID, and suing corporations who use woke policies to discriminate against their workers. Harmeet is one of the top election lawyers in the country, fighting to ensure that all and only legal votes are counted. She is a graduate of Dartmouth College and the University of Virginia Law School, and clerked in the U.S. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. Harmeet is a respected member of the Sikh religious community. In her new role at the DOJ, Harmeet will be a tireless defender of our constitutional rights and will enforce our civil rights and election laws fairly and firmly. Okay? That is a ringing endorsement. And to the extent that the Civil Rights Division would have to prosecute election-related crimes, I guess maybe we need it for that. I don't know how. If the states don't fix elections on that level, I don't know how any of this matters. What we need is is all of the people to understand that elections are stolen, and more importantly, after they understand that elections are stolen, what they're going to need to come to understand is that elections are fake, and they're not how leaders are chosen. Okay, and sooner or later, we just all have to grow up past that. And people are like, "Oh, the votes still count." Even if the votes count, too much is played out behind the scenes, and I don't believe the votes count. They make deals on even the lower level political offices. People like George Soros and the Open Society Foundation and other global philanthropists spend all the money they want to put new school board members in place. They have a national association of school boards so that they can implement the entire global agenda at every school all around the country. Okay? So the idea that it's not totally rigged Even in a situation where the votes counted, it's still totally rigged. But it's worse than that because the votes don't count. And they have systems set up to make sure that votes aren't even real. And of course, we are led to believe that we have many more Americans in the country than we actually have, and blah, blah, blah. What a shit show. And fine, it's a shit show. Okay. Nobody's denying that it's a shit show. The point is, you don't act like they're just easy solutions. Oh, we'll just do this if we empower these Republican establishment normies because Donald Trump says that they're good. Now, again, I'm not saying that specifically about Harmeet Dillon. She's not even necessarily included in that. I'm just saying the general trend is to seek our customary sources of comfort and warmth on Fox News and with the Republican establishment and re-empower that side of the uniparty, all while we think that because our controlled opposition or their controlled opposition is melting down on television, that we've got them right where we want them. The people playing the game at a high level don't care who's melting down on television. So here's someone who's melting down on television. Mark Elias, the Democrat lawfare attorney who at Perkins Coie helped set up the Steele dossier and the rest of the Russiagate scandal. He is included in Rico Grande, the Trump civil RICO filing against Hillary Clinton et al. What else is Mark Elias famous for? This is the Democrat election lawyer. Let's see what he has to say. Breaking: Donald Trump has nominated a sycophant loyalist to head the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. This will put pressure on groups and election lawyers to fight for voting rights in court. DOJ will be on the side of vote suppressors and election deniers. And so they are going to fight hard to maintain the system of voting as it exists now. And I would presume that that does not just mean the election apparatus in a physical, technical way, but also the idea of any form of popular vote that we would then be clinging to. Oh, the people have to vote on this. The people have to vote on this. The people should be electing their senators directly through the popular vote. These were not ideas of the founders and of the founding. And the reason they were not ideas of the founding is not because they couldn't think of it and just didn't have a proper respect for civil rights. The reason's because they knew it was a bad idea. You know, that's why they fought a lot. That's why the so-called anti-federalists, who were not actually anti-federalists, they were pro-federalists. The Federalists, as they're called now, Hamilton and the like, were about empowering a large central government on behalf of global banking and the British crown. Okay. So they weren't even anti-federalists. They were federalists. They didn't, or, you know, they didn't want to empower that central government. They wanted a more federalized and decentralized system. They were standing on principle based on what they knew to be the signs of the global regime. If we all right now were sitting in those pubs by candlelight, having hushed conversations before we wrote our missives to the local newspaper under pen names, talking about the right way to do things and what the signs of the global regime were, anybody whose policies and policy proposals represented the qualities of what we knew to be the characteristics of the global regime would be immediately seen as enemies. Okay. And, you know, it doesn't mean we can't work together, right? And make them not enemies. I'm not trying to condemn anyone. Okay. But you would recognize those things as signs of the presence of the enemy, signs of people wanting to do the bidding of the enemy for this or that incentive. All right. And I'm using enemy as maybe I should use adversary. Okay. Because, hey, there are people with different ideas about how government can and should work. And those people believe that they have some principled moral ground to walk on there. And I don't know everything. Maybe they're right. I don't think they are, but maybe they are. And history proves that they're not, but maybe they are. So if all of a sudden they were like, hey, we should take this money in from all of these global banks and we should sell this and that port off to foreign energy firms and whatever else, you'd be like, wait, what? I thought we were going to like decentralized kind of sovereign nationalist sort of thing, right? The multipolar world is emerging. Aren't we trying to decentralize? Why are you suggesting, and deglobalize? Why are you suggesting that we allow global powers to begin owning part of our land and operating their industries on our soil to their benefit, not the benefit of our people? Right? You'd be like, wait a second. Why is Jeff so committed to doing what the French want? That's very strange. And that would be a totally sensible way to approach things. So I look at these figures that way, and I try to figure out, is this something principled that we should be working toward? Is this in the right direction? And so, they had ideas about all these things that were clearly in the wrong direction. And they wrote down all of it at the time. They wrote it all down. And you can read those papers. There was a history prior to the Constitution. You can read the Anti-Federalist papers. You can read the writings of other founders and see quite clearly that they were like, hey, no, you shouldn't do that. That's clearly a concession to the global regime that we just revolted from. We just had a revolution to throw off this colonial power, and now you are arguing on their behalf. That's what they were saying at the time. And it turned out that they were right about those things. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone who, pushed to get the Constitution that we have put in place is necessarily an enemy, but they were wrong, right? So if you can see it back then, and you can see what's happened now, and you know that what's happened now is clearly wrong, and they were presenting the opposite solution back then it makes sense to say, maybe they were the ones who were actually right in a principled way that we should be attempting to, resemble in our policy prescriptions. So is Mark Elias going to protect our ideas about what elections should be and what they should mean and what voting should mean? And is that the intent here? And he's going to present anything that attempts to go back and wind back the election process as the suppression of voting and the denial of elections. That's what he said. I mean, that's what he sounds like he's prepared to defend in court. Let's look at it one more time. He says this will put pressure on groups and election lawyers to fight for voting rights in court. DOJ will be on the side of vote suppressors and election deniers. Now, shouldn't be a DOJ. Shouldn't be any court fight. When things don't comport to the Constitution, they should just be removed. Shouldn't have to have court fights about them. I don't know. I think that every bit of legislation based on any of these post number 10, post Bill of Rights constitutional amendments, got to be looked at. Everything that wasn't properly ratified, got to be looked at. All statutory law based on the 14th Amendment got to be looked at. And when it's looked at, it doesn't go through a process of being removed. It's just removed because it's null and void. This is how the founders looked at it. That is a nullity. That's it. And then no one follows it. No one comports with it at all because it's not the law of the land and it's not what anybody agreed to. That's not the birthright. Okay. We're not all just We certainly weren't all meant to. I said we're not all. I have to adjust that because we are actually all born into this servitude and we're registered with a number at birth that says we are, but we shouldn't be. And that wasn't our birthright. The whole point was that we were born as free people. And from that point on, it is our business how our life goes. Not for the government to guarantee us some sort of minimum standard that they can't possibly guarantee, and instead reduce the standards of everything. So, hey, all right, we're having fun. We're having fun. I said we were going to talk about Syria, and we are going to do that. And there is just a couple more pieces, maybe just one more thing to do with the old domestic political bullshit. Gosh, there's a lot of it. By the way, how about this this supposed hitman who turned up at a McDonald's in Altoona with a murder weapon and a manifesto? Wow. Trump just posted not too long ago. Check this out. Sorry to be changing subjects here. I went on Truth Social to pull something up, and look at this. Any person or company investing $1 billion or more in the United States of America will receive fully expedited approvals and permits, including, but in no way limited to, all environmental approvals. Get ready to rock. Holy moly. Gotta love that, man. You might as well just say that that the EPA is finished. I have to post that clearly. I mean, that's basically a declaration that the EPA is finished. I don't know how you read that any other way. They're just going to be completely skipped over for $1 billion. And the reeing, I have to check CNN.com. Holy meltdown coming on that one. Oh, they don't have it yet. I cannot wait. I cannot wait for this. Wow. That is going to be hysterical. These people are going to go nuts. He's selling out our planet for $1 billion. Oh, man. Funny timeline, man. It's a funny timeline. Let's go to, we talked about Shifty Schiff yesterday. Oh, man, you know who else we got to talk about? Got to talk about Benny Thompson. Benny Thompson. That dumb man. Gosh, I got to find Benny Thompson's post. I forgot all about that. So let's go to Liz Cheney here. She today, or yesterday, I should say, threatened with jail. Cheney condemns Trump's assault on the rule of law. This from the New York Times. Oh, this was actually Sunday. Apologies. Peter Baker. Former Representative Liz Cheney on Sunday called President-elect Donald J. Trump's threat to imprison her and other members of a congressional committee that investigated the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol an assault on the rule of law and the foundations of our republic. And Trump did this in that interview with Kristen Welker. Let me see if I can actually find that. I bet I can. That was good video. That was such a, here we are. That was such a great interview with Trump. And you got to love that this stuff is going out to the entirety of the American public on the normie news channels. Honestly, Trump talking to the mainstream liberal media is more valuable than all of Con Inc. media combined in terms of waking up the normies, which is why we don't actually need any of that. They do the work of the mainstream media.
He was behind it, and so was Benny Thompson and everybody on that committee.
We're going to...
For what they did,
yeah.
Honestly, they should go to jail.
So you think Liz Cheney should go to jail?
For what they did.
Everyone on the committee, you think
I think everybody on anybody that voted in favor.
Are you going to direct your FBI director and your attorney general to send them to jail?
Not at all. I think that they'll have to look at that, but I'm not going to. I'm going to focus on drill, baby, drill.
Drill, baby, drill. Okay, so let's get back to Liz Cheney. Here we are. Hold for processing. It's all happening. It's all happening. Responding to comments Mr. Trump made in an interview aired on Sunday on Meet the Press, Ms. Cheney said the incoming president lied about the January 6th Select Committee and that there would be no conceivably appropriate factual or constitutional basis to prosecute its members. Here's the truth. Donald Trump attempted to overturn the 2020 presidential election and seize power, she said in a statement. He mobilized an angry mob and sent them to the United States Capitol, where they attacked police officers, invaded the building, and halted the official counting of electoral votes. Trump watched on television as police officers were brutally beaten and the Capitol was assaulted, refusing for hours to tell the mob to leave. I'm trying to find Benny Thompson's letter as well, because he gets very upset. These letters. She continued, this was the worst breach of our Constitution by any president in our nation's history. Donald Trump's suggestion that members of Congress who later investigated his illegal and unconstitutional actions should be jailed is a continuation of his assault on the rule of law and the foundations of our republic. Don't you mean our democracy? Don't you mean our democracy? This is scary that she's calling it a republic, especially after the media has told us over and over again. CNN did a whole special on it. They sent Donny O'Sullivan all around the country to ask Trump supporters whether we had a democracy or a republic, and then say that it was a conspiracy theory to contend that we were supposed to have a republic. They should just be like, yeah, but the point is you don't have a republic anymore. Be honest about it. I bet they would convince plenty of communists. Like, there's a lot of people who are real groveling statists out there who would be more than happy to go along with the whole program, hook, line, and sinker. I don't know why they spend so much time lying about what they want to do when there are so many people out there who would support that and probably support state violence against the other 75% of the country. I mean, they got their 5 or 10% for sure. And they have, 30% who will go along with anything. That's basically how it looks now. They're just not honest about it. Why don't they just be honest about it and say, we don't care about majorities. We don't care about democracy. What we care about is this particular political agenda that allows us to, and everybody else to engage in any sort of immorality, so long as all the power and wealth is consistently funneled to a very small group of people from a very small plot of land somewhere in Kazaria, Ukraine. Cheney did something that's inexcusable, Mr. Trump said, along with Thompson and the people on the Unselect Committee of political thugs and, creeps. They deleted and destroyed all the evidence, and Cheney was behind it. So was Benny Thompson and everybody on that committee. For what they did, honestly, they should go to jail, as you just saw Trump say. Where I am so reliant on my ability to find information on Telegram quickly that I sometimes will forget to just make my life easy and snag it in the first place. But I have no doubt I will retrieve this info. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I will just completely blow it. All right, I've completely blown it. Anyhow, Benny Thompson was like, "Nuh-uh." we didn't hide this information from anyone. And there's a chance he could be telling the truth about that. I am really honestly very interested in what the true story of the J6 committee ends up being. Because if the J6 committee was to test in public the reporting of the mainstream media, they sure did a great job of it. I mean, all these people could easily be controlled. So I don't know. We're told that the evidence that they used, the video and other evidence, is unavailable because they destroyed it. And Trump has hammered that story pretty hard. Now, I'm not sure they ever had that evidence. I'm not sure they would have ever had access to that evidence because that evidence would have been tied up elsewhere. And to the extent that that evidence is tied up elsewhere, that's a really good indication for our side of things, hoping that things will get resolved in a productive fashion. But man, oh man. Let's see what Benny Thompson says here. Here's a Benny Thompson reaction from C-SPAN.
Reaction over the weekend, President Trump has suggested that January 6th members should
I'm sorry, slide you over a little bit. Let's work you back up just a tad. That's perfect.
My hair all right?
Yeah, you're good.
Over the weekend, former President Trump in an interview suggested that January 6th members should be jailed. Do you have any reaction to that? And do you think that a preemptive pardon is necessary?
Well, I'll take it one at a time, okay? First of all, former to-be President Trump is absolutely wrong. There's nothing we did as a January 6th Select Committee that violates the law. Just because you disagree with the work of the committee is no way to threaten those members of the committee with jail. So obviously that's his opinion. As to whether or not President Biden does anything with respect to that, it's his decision. I'm comfortable with the fact that as members of Congress, we were doing our job. And as long as we do our job, there are certain guarantees that we have. And I look forward to enforcing those guarantees.
Now, Adam Schiff, he said that he thinks that a preemptive pardon isn't necessary. Do you agree with that? Do you think it's not necessary?
Well, he's a member of the committee. He's absolutely has his right. I think that's a decision that is left to the president.
And then what do you make of Kash Patel? How concerned are you if he were to get confirmed to hold this FBI position?
Well, again, I think people in positions of responsibility should carry out those responsibilities according to the statute. I don't think you have to go against individuals because you dislike them or they take positions you disagree with. As a nation of laws, clearly, we stand strong on the principles of freedom of speech, assembly, and all those things that are guaranteed by the Constitution. And obviously, I would expect someone in his position to do likewise.
Thank you so much, Congressman.
All right.
That was an interesting answer. Okay, so he's saying that they didn't do anything wrong, but he's also saying that if Biden believes that he should give him a blanket pardon, he's comfortable with that. Wow. So what he said was that, to be fair, he's saying that he's comfortable that they did their job and that they have certain guarantees. Now, what certain guarantees is he talking about? Well, there's no way that committee was formed according to the House rules. Nothing could have been more obvious. There was no ranking member. Nancy Pelosi denied Kevin McCarthy's selections on which Republican members of the minority would serve on that committee. And they had only Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney who were Pelosi selections. There's plenty wrong with the J6 committee. We've talked about that a number of times. What guarantees is he talking about? I think he has to be talking about the speech and debate clause, and this is what Adam Schiff believes protects him as well. And let's just go to this for just a second, because we don't talk about this very often. They believe that they can say, we talked about Schiff going out to the media and relaying what he portrayed to be privileged information, classified information that he got from the House Intel Committee. The clause states, the senators and representatives shall in all cases except treason, felony, and breach of the peace be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their respective houses and in going to and returning from the same. And for any speech or debate in either house, they shall not be questioned in any other place. And houses does not mean their personal homes. If you are listening and not watching, it means the houses of Congress. So that's pretty full coverage, except in the cases of treason, felony, and breach of the peace. Are they committing treason? Perhaps. They're certainly not legitimate representatives. They're already serving in an illegitimate body on behalf of a foreign occupying power. So the argument ends, for me, as far as that stuff's concerned, right there. Now, does that apply to everybody else serving in those bodies? If the answer is yes, I'm totally satisfied with that answer. This provision was designed to prevent the executive branch from using arrest as a means to intimidate or influence legislative members, ensuring that they can freely debate and legislate without external pressures. And so they would contend that that is what they were doing, and that by the letter of the law, they're totally protected. Immunity from legal action, protection for legislative aides, limitations on protection. While the clause provides broad immunity, it does not protect against all actions. For example, purely political activities that do not pertain to legislative duties are not covered. You can make the argument that the J6 committee had nothing to do with their legislative duties, but of course, they would make the argument otherwise. Additionally, criminal conduct unrelated to legislative functions is also outside the scope of protection. Were they engaged in criminal conduct? I think you could make strong arguments that they were, most particularly Adam Schiff with his espionage. But these people are subverting the United States of America and the presidency. They are subverting the Constitution and the constitutional order. They were supporting an illegitimate, unelected Manchurian candidate of a president on behalf of an occupying foreign power. So I don't think the speech and debate clause is going to cover them, but even if it did, it wouldn't matter in a real way. Okay. We are past this stuff. And people don't want to admit that because they think that it's somehow me suggesting that we choose to live in a lawless society or choose to act in lawless manners. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm not suggesting anyone do anything violent or immoral. I would never suggest such a thing. In fact, I would suggest the exact opposite. Avoid violence at all costs and avoid immorality at all costs until violence is necessitated by someone else's encroachment. Okay? And I mean in a real physical way, not like words on the internet. So I wouldn't recommend for any of that. But at the same time, we are well beyond this, okay? If they have already violated all the laws and they are denying the people of the basic rights found not only in the Constitution, but human rights codes all around the world and our basic natural rights that are inviolable, then they've already crossed the line, okay? And the fact that there are no legitimate representatives in government invalidates all of it. So the speech and debate clause would not be the sort of thing that would make it impossible to prosecute these people or to hold them accountable for their treason and their usurpation. And if it is used as a justification of that on the part of even on Kash Patel, who I respect and admire very much, and I, expect and demand good things from, including hopefully taking the FBI apart, because there should not be a federal bureau of investigation. They got to do that stuff, right? I don't know if even prosecution is the proper thing. And, there's probably going to be an argument that all of it just simply has to be moved on from in order to move to the next level. And maybe there's an argument towards sovereignty in there that suggests the state is not the organ of authority and punishment that we have come to rely on it to be, and that depending on a federal government to do any sort of punishing at all is already a mistake. Maybe that's maybe we'll find out that is a persuasive argument in the future. I don't know. What else? Someone asked about McConnell being RBG'd. I mean, I don't know what's going on with Mitch McConnell, glitch McConnell, as it were. He's glitched out multiple times. He showed up one day with a hand that looked just, let me see if I can find it. Hold for processing. Mitch McConnell, bruised hand. Mitch McConnell looks like he's been banged up a number of times. I mean, what in God's name is this? Here we are. Look at that. That's old Glitch McConnell. Both hands. What in the world? What's the deal with Mitch McConnell's hands? Now, I get it. That doesn't mean anything. There could be any number of normal, reasonable explanations besides his owners beat him. Could be. Is Mitch McConnell definitely alive? No, I don't know how you can argue that he's definitely alive. We were told that last year, Mitch McConnell at some sort of dinner slipped and fell and hit his head and was concussed, and he missed months. Let's remind ourselves of Mitch's story together. Did Mitch McConnell miss months of Senate time due to health concerns? In July and August, Mitch experienced 2 episodes during public appearances where he appeared to freeze and was unresponsive for several seconds. These incidents prompted widespread speculation about his health, especially given that he is 81 years old and had previously suffered a concussion from a fall earlier in the year. And no evidence of a stroke or seizure disorder, momentary lightheadedness. That's all it was, possibly related to his concussion. His absence from Senate activities for nearly 6 weeks in the spring of 2023 due to the concussion and fractured rib fueled further speculation, blah, blah, blah. Multiple glitches, disgustingly bruised hands, and a fall, a concussion, and a broken rib. I don't know what has happened to him. We just have to pretend that everything is normal, no matter how often the world proves that things are otherwise. I was trying to decide if there's one more thing that I want to get into, or if I want to just go straight to the old geopolitics. Let's do that. So yesterday, Viktor Orban, the leader of the sovereign state of Hungary, apologies, now I remember what I wanted to do and why I was on Truth Social before distracting myself, as I often do. I was looking for a particular Trump post, and here it is. If you've been online much today, you probably already know what I'm talking about, of course. It's this here one. It was a pleasure to have dinner the other night with Governor Justin Trudeau of the great state of Canada. I look forward to seeing the governor again soon so that we may continue our in-depth talks on tariffs and trade, the results of which will be truly spectacular for all. How about that? Governor of the great state of Canada is the president of the United States and potentially God Emperor of the United States and potentially King of the world, telling us that Canada has been annexed. Do we already own Canada? I said, by the way, in response, I had to unfortunately correct the spelling of the King of the world, just doing him a little favor. Governor Castro. And with great respect, sir. King of the world. So is Trump saying that Canada has been annexed? Well, I hope not. I don't think that we need to annex more states, although maybe we need to temporarily before we fragment again. We certainly don't need to create a U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement where they all become part of the same North American union. Is that what there's a project actually to do that on behalf of like the World Economic Forum or something. And if Trump is telling us that that's what's happening, that is not a good idea. I know that it's very funny to talk about annexing Canada and Mexico, but no one should want that. All right. Like, what are we going to do? Are we going to subsidize them? Should they immediately become, because of the size of their land mass and their military and their economy, should they immediately become more important than the people in our states already? Seems like that's where that could head real quickly. I don't really like the sound of that. Curtis Good in the chat says Mitch and Jay Leno seem to have been in the same accident. Yeah, I think a lot of very famous people have been in that same accident at some point in their careers. I don't think increasing the size of the country is the right move right now. The interesting thing, though, is that for the longest time, all you have to assume is that we were lied to about our history at some point. Okay. Since the revolution, at some point, we have been lied to in terms, or probably at many points, as we are continually sold back to the global regime. No matter what, in our lifetimes, we have been lied to about the status of the United States vis-a-vis the British Crown and the United Kingdom. Okay. Are we as much a colony as we were in 1776? We might be more of a colony than we were at that point. Canada is also a colony, all right, of the same global regime. They are officially still part of the Commonwealth. And we, of course, are independent, which means so much. Now, they were able to make a union of states, much as they were with the European Union and much as they intend, and the Soviet Union, by the way, and as much as they intend to do with an African Union in the future. So is a union of those states under that umbrella of the global fiat regime a good thing? Probably not. But we can move on from that. Would it be good to expand that union? Well, here's the thing. If Donald Trump actually has conquered, or whatever entity and that Donald Trump is the face or head of, has conquered that global regime, and we are behind on an informational timeline to the extent where it is hard for us to admit that something like that could have happened and is true and is what we're seeing. Well, if he did that, then Canada would already be under the purview of that conquering regime, obviously. So then it would be a state of the larger regime. And if Canada was a state and everything was simply fragmented into these different states, and then, to undergo the process of fragmentation again and perhaps again and again in the future, then that could be a good thing. Donald Trump running Canada on behalf of America is certainly a better thing for America than Canada still operating on behalf of the global regime as our neighbor. So I guess there's that on a practical level, but I don't think in terms of a long-term or principled approach, that would be the right move. It is very, very funny. It's probably excellent for narrative leverage. And, if this sort of thing makes Canada raise in their nationalist sentiment, then you got to just tip your hat to DJT one more time and the brilliance of the info op. Can Donald J. Trump make Canadians want MACA? Can Donald J. Trump insult Justin Trudeau and Justin Castro to the point where Canadians are like, all right, that's the last straw, eh? Let's all have a meeting down at Tim Hortons. We'll get a couple of coffees, eh? And we'll discuss Canadian nationalism. Now, watch out, because Canada is socialist AF. So you know what nationalism looks like from a socialist point of view. But hey, we're in a communist state here. So are we communist nationalists? No, we are just sovereign nationalists wanting America first. On America First principles in decentralized fashion and abhorring collectivism wherever it arises. Okay? You have to stay actively anti-collectivist and actively sovereign, or else the whole project is null and void. It has to be. As soon as you disavow sovereignty and move in the direction of collectivism, no matter what the practical reason might be, you have already submitted to the state and its designs. I've been thinking about this quite a lot lately, obviously, because I'm reading Nick Land, and the neo-reactionary philosophy, as Nick Land describes it, is really about fragmentation and trying to create these very small corporate states. And it's not corporate as in owned by a corporation. It's run as a corporation. And to the extent that we're owned by corporations already and run as a corporation in some sense, it's really about having much smaller versions of that with governments that have an actual separation of powers and duties, not just a check and a balance, but each separate set would have a separate, each separate branch would have a truly separate set of powers arranged in a different fashion. And we can go into that at some point. But man, as new systems emerge and as this fragmentation happens, as we go away from the fiat regime banking system and their centralizing force is no longer a coercive force in the world, well, what you're going to see is that fragmentation. It's necessarily going to exist. So we probably should welcome it, and we should at least be able to work on understanding it as it emerges. Otherwise, we just march our way into this one world global order, which, it's not better if if the reins of that thing are seized and it's still marched forward into a one world global order. It ain't the way. I mean, we can clearly see that it's not the way. It's not just about the right motivations of the political system. It's the political system itself that is geared toward creating that sort of system. And it thrives on those sorts of motivations. Let's go to Reuters. Viktor Orban visiting the king of the world in his palace in South Florida, the Winter White House. Hungary's Viktor Orban meets Trump and Musk at Mar-a-Lago. Orban tweeted or posted on X, formerly Twitter, USA Today, not the newspaper. He's just in the USA Today. The future has begun. An afternoon in Mar-a-Lago with real Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Michael Waltz. So the future has begun. Well, that's interesting. Can Donald Trump take over his role early since Adam Schiff is allowed to assume his? The two leaders also met in July and discussed the possibilities of peace, a spokesperson for the prime minister had said, as Orban pushed for a ceasefire in Ukraine. Orban, a nationalist leader and longtime Trump supporter, has grown increasingly isolated within the European Union for his ties to Russia and opposition to military aid for Ukraine. Increasingly isolated in the European Union in 2016, to everyone with any sort of elitist or globalist tendencies would have thought, oh gosh, he's becoming a pariah. How distasteful. Now it's just like, oh, that's awesome. Becoming isolated from European communists means you're doing the right thing. That's like someone you can totally get on board with. Let's continue. Speaking of Ukraine, Orban has been meeting with Trump, obviously, throughout this entire period ongoing over the last few years. And so it's not particularly notable that he is doing that. But it is notable that the alliance is, the bond there continues to grow. And hold on, I'm just pulling up this next link. And that it is becoming more obvious that whatever they were discussing and planning over the course of the last few years is still very much in play. And there's nothing about the Logan Act. Donald Trump is clearly presenting himself as leader of the world with those who are on board with the program. And you have to think that the other day was part of his submission tour to France, much like he had one. We showed the picture yesterday, Donald Trump walking in front of the so-called Queen of England, Donald Trump visiting the Forbidden City with Xi Jinping, Donald Trump taking the soccer ball from Vladimir Putin, the sword dance and the orb in the Middle East, the sword dance in Saudi Arabia. What else do we have? The crossing of the demilitarized zone between North Korea and South Korea. I feel like I'm missing a couple here. What else was part of the submission tour? Maybe I got them all. So Trump essentially manhandled Manny Mac in France over the weekend. He is clearly presenting himself as the leader of not only the free world, but the entire world. Now, is that presumptuous? Is it actually Donald Trump submitting to all of those foreign leaders in all of those videos? I suppose it could be. I don't see any reason to believe that it is. But you never know. It seems like Donald Trump has essentially mounted the global regime and is now just riding it around as it tries to buck him off in a rodeo. and he's just whipping it repeatedly. Oh man. Now I want to see that visual in meme form. This is Reuters from yesterday about the comedic actor in Ukraine, Zelensky. I love all the different spellings. Seeks diplomatic end to Russia's war, floats role for foreign troops. We talked about the fact that conditions for peace were laid out before Putin's very brutal invasion ever took place. Demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, no entrance to NATO, no entrance to the EU, and they would have to stop. They would have to leave independent, at least, the Donbass. Instead, the Donbass has voted in referenda to become part of Russia and are now part of Russia, as Crimea is. So they did not accept that deal, and now they will receive a worse deal, obviously. Zelensky didn't want their deal because he cannot be seen to be giving these land concessions, although that is what he will ultimately be seen to be doing. Until then, he's just going to press on and keep asking for more money. And the Biden regime will keep being seen as giving him more money. The remarks at a joint press conference with German opposition leader Friedrich Merz were the latest to signal Kyiv's increasing openness to war negotiations, with Donald Trump preparing to return to the White House on January 20th. And it occurs to me that we should find out, because this is signal. Friedrich Merz. What political affiliations does Friedrich Merz have? A prominent figure in German politics, primarily associated with the Christian Democratic Union, a center-right political party. So he is being called the opposition. He had a rivalry with former Chancellor Angela Merkel. I'm trying to figure out if he has formed a coalition with the, what is it, the ADF? AFD, sorry. He has explicitly ruled out forming a coalition with the far-right Alternative for Deutschland. Isn't that interesting? So how opposition is he? That's the question. Is he the opposition, as in the controlled opposition of the regime? Interesting. The U.S. president-elect, who has said he wants to end the war quickly, called on Sunday for an immediate ceasefire and negotiations to end the madness after he met Zelensky and Emmanuel Macron for talks in Paris. Ukraine wants this war to end more than anyone else. No doubt a diplomatic resolution would save more lives. We do seek it, Zelensky told reporters. Zelensky's spokesperson later said that Kyiv was preparing a December meeting of key European partners who, together with the U.S., were capable of ensuring the maximum strengthening of our state. The aim was to develop a joint position that would hold strong both in negotiations and on the battlefield. Zelensky said he had discussed a freezing of the front lines in the war when he met with Macron and Trump. Russia controls nearly a fifth of Ukrainian territory after launching the 2022 invasion that unleashed the biggest conflict in Europe since World War II. A freezing of the lines means that the Russian territory is held by Russia. Zelensky said he told the two leaders that he did not believe Putin actually wanted to end the war and that the Russian president had to be forced to make peace. You can only exert force if Ukraine is strong. A strong Ukraine before any diplomacy means a strong Ukraine on the battlefield. Oh, so then he doesn't actually want to end the war. He wants to get strong enough to defeat Russia and then say, okay, we're ready to end the war if you give us back our land. And again, he's a comedic actor playing a role. Okay. We don't have to take his words all that seriously. He is basically manipulating a public narrative. And I believe it's so that people can understand that this land has to be given back to Russia and that there is no rightful way or righteous way or practical way that whatever quote unquote Ukraine might be gets to keep that land. Now, Ukraine has always been a construct of the global regime and absolutely nothing else. And to the extent that the global regime is being eradicated and NATO is probably going to fall and the European Union hopefully will eventually fall. And at that point, countries will just sort themselves out rather than having the global regime making up the borders. Europe's going to look a lot different. I had this map up yesterday, and I'm saying all of this for a reason, because we're about to talk about a very similar principle when it comes to Syria. Let me see here. So let's look at a map of Eastern Europe in 1900 and a map of Eastern Europe today. Hold for processing. Maybe this is a good and clear one. I just want to make a simple point here. Oh gosh, that's 1330, the Holy Roman Empire. Oh man, just give me a good one. Give me a good one with some bright colors that we can differentiate. Oh gosh, what a disaster. Okay, so Europe in 1900 looks absolutely nothing like Europe today. And the reason the 1900 era is critical is because it was around then that the mission of global Zionism kicked off and has caused both world wars and the total redrawing of maps on behalf of that global regime, the rise of the League of Nations and then the United Nations. And for the countries that did not benefit from that program, one would think that they might want their shit back. And I think that we're probably seeing some level of that right now. Let's switch maps here. And you can feel however you want about that, okay? I'm not even advocating that this is the right solution. I don't pretend to know the right solution. It's also not my business how other countries, how neighboring countries choose to draw their borders. That's their business. And an America First agenda and a focus on sovereign nationalism should make all of that extremely obvious. So whether or not I think that they would be justified in wanting their territory back is immaterial. It's just my opinion. That doesn't mean a hell of a lot. Now, if I was involved in like the negotiations, maybe it would matter, but I'm not involved in the negotiations. And I think that there is virtually no chance that I ever will be. So I really don't need to concern myself with expressing one opinion or another about how I think this should be. So this is how things essentially are right now. But of course, a quarter, well, that's Crimea right there down at the bottom of Ukraine. Okay. That peninsula into the Black Sea. That's all Russia, as is the border territory above that on the mainland. And then all around the right side of Ukraine, all of that is Russia right now. And they'll probably make it so that the entire area encompassed by that river up to the around Russia's border and down the edge of Belarus is all Russia. And then Belarus will take a chunk, and Poland will take a chunk, and Hungary will probably take this chunk, and Romania will get a little bit, and who knows what happens with Moldova. Romania right now is engaged in a fake election problem. And let me see if I can pull that up real quick. This actually does matter. I can't believe, damn it. I'm going to run into the same problem I ran into yesterday. I got interested in way too many things along the way. And if we don't get to Syria, it'll be tomorrow on the subscriber stream. But I think you can maybe see where I'm going with some of this. And I kind of previewed some of it yesterday anyhow. So this is Politico from over the weekend. Romanian election. What the hell is going on? And you might have seen us talk about this a bit on Devolution Power Hour the other night. I'm just going to read the beginning and the end here. Scrapping an election between two rounds of voting is a massive step to take, but Romania's constitutional court decided it was essential to protect democracy from foreign attack. The court's move to annul the Romanian presidential election plunged the country into turmoil, and it's not clear where the upheaval will end. Here's Politico's guide to the extraordinary crisis in democracy engulfing one of the EU and NATO's most important Eastern European member countries. How about that? So a court just decided to nullify their election. Isn't that amazing? The coalition will name a prime minister. On December 1st, Romanian voters also selected a new parliament. Next week, a broad coalition made up of 4 parties will form a government that will work on organizing the new presidential election. Isn't that amazing? So Georgescu, who's the man who won, who was formerly associated with the WEF and some other globalist bodies, but I've got some people in Romania in my chats, and they're like, we understand that that is the background. We see this guy similar to Putin or to Trump, one of these guys that was associated with those organizations and ideologies by virtue of his life and his former roles, the same way Xi Jinping was the head of the Chinese Communist Party. And we see these people now as working against that global regime and the global fiat banking system. And if you are opposing that, then you are representing the good twin. Okay. If you are for decentralization, for multipolarity, and against the global banking regime, that's the global good twin. All right. And I don't know about your former associations or anything else, but I know that some pretty pro-sovereign, pro-nationalist people in Romania are like, yes, this is the guy. That's better information than what I'm going to glean from the media. And they are doing everything they can, obviously, to keep him out of office and make it look legitimate that they're doing so. The coalition will name a prime minister to be approved by the incumbent president. Iohannis's mandate would have ended on December 21st, but he said he will stay in power until his successor is sworn in. Isn't that amazing? So the regime president in Romania is going to stay there. The new Congress, the new parliament is going to come in to power. They're going to form a coalition, and then they will name a prime minister. And the global regime media will tell us that that prime minister is the leader of Romania. And again, we have essentially the same dynamic that we've discussed many times in Venezuela. And we just talked about this actually last night on Hindsight 2020, because there is a perfect story about Venezuela in 2020. And I'm going to just touch on that in 1 second, because it's a mirror of this story. It is amazing to me. People have got to wrap their heads around this, okay? And this means that elections are fake, especially as, reported by the media, but it really does mean that elections are fake. It is just the gathering of a public mandate, a clear public mandate when it comes to the sovereign nationalist. Let me continue here. In the meantime, Criminal investigators have launched an inquiry into the cyber attacks on election infrastructure, which were detailed in the declassified intelligence files. Does this sound like the efforts made by the Democrat Communist Party in the wake of the 2016 election? Kind of. This is the third investigation opened by Romanian prosecutors after the general prosecutor launched two others looking at voter corruption, computer system fraud, and campaign money laundering of at least €1 million. Okay. So again, no matter how this goes, it's good that the world sees this. Okay. They're going to probably announce that they've gotten a prime minister and the parliament is going to choose when to hold another round of elections. And then they'll make sure that those elections are rigged for a globalist candidate. And then at that point, Johannes will step down. I don't know how this stuff's going to go. I don't know how many levels of manipulation and fakery are involved here. But until we are aware of a next level, then this is the pattern. TikTok is also under fire at the EU level, having been summoned to the European Parliament for questioning over its content moderation during the presidential primary, and with the European Commission recently ordering it to preserve data on the Romanian election. TikTok did shut down 3 influence campaigns after the first round poll. So they're going after TikTok, just as our illegitimate Congress went after TikTok this year to implement the exact same policy that Donald Trump implemented in 2020. And that policy will come to fruition on January 21st of 2025. At that point, it will probably be that TikTok is clearly owned by Donald Trump, under the umbrella of DJT, formerly TMTG, the media umbrella company. There are also calls on the Constitutional Court to cancel the parliamentary election, which was sandwiched between the 2 rounds of the presidential contest. Some parties point to the fact that the ballot was held during the same hybrid attacks that triggered Friday's annulment ruling. All right. So the same election system in 3 different elections, and they're saying one of them counts. How do you get there? Well, the only way you can get there is by having fake elections. It's not that they're just ignoring the results of real elections. It's that elections are fake, and they're clearly saying, well, that election didn't work, but we're still just going to install our guy anyway. And that is what they did with Joe Biden. And it didn't have to be recognized by the people, but the people recognized that because the people, by and large, at that time, were groveling statists, and there were very few of us who never called him president. Let's go to Venezuela from 2020 briefly, and you will see how much these stories mirror one another. Now, let me just say one more thing before we do this. I made this point, I think last week, maybe the week before, when it comes to Brazil and the devolution, the quasi-devolution scenario that we see taking place down there. Bolsonaro, the Brazilian Trump, he's attacked. They try to assassinate him. They're trying to imprison him. He was president. He won again. They stole an election with the Dominion systems. Obviously, there was some algorithmic manipulation in the results there. Bolsonaro was up in that election. And as soon as the results started to change directions, I said very clearly online, we're going to get a 51-49 Dominion election result. And that is exactly what we got. And then we got a Brazilian J6. And we've got Brazil big tech censorship issues. All of it is playing out the same way. Okay. So we look around the world, we see the exact same stories playing out. You got to understand that this stuff is scripted. It's scripted to manipulate the public, to coerce public consent. And the stories have to be the same because people are conditioned to react the same ways to the same stimuli, to the same emotional manipulations along the same story structure. And the story structures have to be maintained. And if you've ever studied screenwriting or novel writing, as I have, you would know that. You have to hit the same beats in the same genres so that the people can have the same emotional experience as the storyline goes through. Now, whether that's necessary, you could have a chicken and egg discussion, right? On whether there's something natural about the story structure and you need to hit every bit of it in order to process, the story properly and elicit the emotional response, or whether the emotional response is best elicited in this way, and therefore we apply this story structure to all natural storytelling, because the purpose, of course, is the response and not the transmission of truth or reliable information. And I think that would be a very interesting conversation to have. Maybe one day I will have it with a very interesting storyteller who I know. But in the meantime, it's worth understanding that the story structures are the same and they have to be the same. Therefore, we were going to see the same stories playing out over and over and over again. And once we have learned to recognize the stories, we can begin to recognize the proper responses, which, in truth are just the opposite of whatever response they try to elicit. Okay. So once we understand what do they want us to believe, the best place to start is whatever the polar opposite down every one of those characteristics of that story actually is. Okay. You are being projected a total inversion. So you want to unwind each aspect of the inversion. Okay. Down all those different verticals in that story structure, unwind each one of those to its inverted opposite, and you will have a pretty good understanding of what's actually happening. And if you want to know whether or not you have a good understanding, look for evidence of those things in the world, and you will find evidence of those things in the world. And when you can do that, you are going to be so much closer to truth than you could possibly be by understanding the entirety of the central narrative and understanding and gathering all of the documents and being like, oh, I think I've figured out which combination of all this bullshit is actually correct. No, none of that bullshit's actually correct. All of it is inverted on purpose. What do they want me to believe? Go backwards from there. Venezuelans are being asked to vote twice in a week in 2 conflicting polls. Okay. Monday, December 7th, 2020. CNN World. Now, we covered this last night on Hindsight 2020, so I don't want to go all the way through it again. You can find that on Badlands Media. John Harold, Patel Patriot, joined Patrick Gunnels and I for that discussion. But for those who are not going to do that, and because I brought it up, this week, Venezuelans are being asked to go to the polls not once but twice in 2 bizarrely conflicting electoral events. On Monday, December 7th, the government of embattled President Nicolas Maduro celebrated victory in parliamentary elections, largely rejected on the international stage. Okay, so the regime-oriented countries and governments said, no, that election doesn't count. That's it. There's nothing else. Largely rejected on the international stage. That's what it means. They said, our regime countries reject that. We're not doing business with those elected leaders. Now the opposition is holding a competing referendum to gather support and reject the outcome of the weekend's vote. It's the latest split-screen episode in a years-long saga of Venezuela's rival presidencies. And some observers fear it may also be one of the last. For the past 2 years, Venezuela has effectively had 2 dueling presidents. No, they haven't. They've only had Nicolas Maduro, and Juan Guaido was not a president. And they eventually recognized that Juan Guaido was not a president. Even Smartmatic, the electoral product company that had managed previous elections in Venezuela, said it could not guarantee the validity of election results. Ha! How about that? Their software operates our elections here in the United States of America, but they can't even, and it started in Venezuela, but they can't even guarantee the results down in Venezuela. Whoops, I guess. But Maduro paid little notice and inaugurated his second term. This led the opposition to rally around the president of Venezuela's parliament, a young lawmaker named Juan Guaido, who, according to the Constitution, must rule ad interim should the presidency be vacant. But it wasn't vacant. They just declared it vacant and declared Guaido president. Guaido was sworn in as interim president in January 2019. More than 60 countries have recognized his presidency, including the EU, the UK, Canada, and most of Latin America. Okay, Donald Trump did it as well. But Maduro kept the support of China, Russia, Cuba, and Iran and control of the state apparatus. So while Guaido's claim is de jure, Maduro is the de facto ruler in the capital city, Caracas, which means the actual ruler. By staging competing elections, both parties are now essentially trying to build up their claims of legitimacy. Competing elections. The opposition simply created their own election and then tried to get the global regime to convince not only the world, but their own people that Guaido was the legitimate ruler. What did they do in America? The same thing. Except, here's the thing, Americans groveled and went along with it, and Venezuelans didn't. So who's the more free people? The election also erodes the legitimacy of Guaido and the opposition movement by removing them from control of the country's main legislative body. Okay, that's the parliamentary election. They're saying if this election holds, then Guaido and this parliament have been removed from power. And that was the only thing that brought them their legitimacy, because Guaido was the president of that parliament, and the global regime propped up that parliament, as we discovered in the crisis group's report that we went over in depth over the summer. And let me see if I can find the episode. So if you have not listened to that, you will be able to. Because I think that this Venezuela stuff, and, you know, it's, I don't want to, again, I don't want to toot my own horn, but whether you get it from me or someone else, I think that the truth about what happened in Venezuela and what we can see with Romania, these are some of the most important things to understand about our political realities. Okay? I just don't, I don't know. Great. Okay, great. So I found the episode. It is from August 13th, 2024. It is called Stalker Regime. Yeah. And we talked about it on Devolution Power Hour a couple times around the same time. I did multiple episodes on it then. I talked about this in an episode called No Transition. I think that the understanding about what happened in Venezuela with the two presidencies is absolutely crucial. Okay. Most of the opposition had already decided not to participate in the election, calling it a fraud from the beginning. They called it a fraud because there was absolutely no chance that they were going to win. No one was going to believe that they could win. And whatever the global regime did, whatever the media said to the people of Venezuela, no one was going to believe them over Nicolas Maduro. And we just had that proved again in the most massive public display possible a couple of months ago, back in August, while Elon Musk was saying he was going to send Maduro to Mars. Oh, it's also silly. The opposition's own referendum, which begins on Monday, will ask Venezuelans 3 questions. If they want free and fair presidential elections to remove Maduro from power, if they reject the results of Sunday's parliamentary elections, and if they will give the current opposition leadership a mandate to, quote, effort actions to bring back democracy, look after the humanitarian crisis, and protect the people from human rights violations. Okay? So they're like, we lost the elections. What we're going to do instead is hold another election where we ask whoever wants to vote in our fake election, do you want us instead? The vote is cast online through a dedicated app or a Telegram channel and open to both Venezuelans home and abroad to tap into the largely anti-Maduro Venezuelan diaspora. The opposition expects between 3 and 6 million people to take part and hopes to emphasize both Maduro and the international community, the legitimacy of Guaido's claim to the presidency. Now, this is 2020. That never happened. That never came anywhere close to happening. None of what they said or did made any difference in the world. None of it mattered at all. And it does not have to matter because it's all bullshit. And it only exists on a false reality layer. It exists as the product of abstract power projection and nothing else. It's just not real unless everyone decides to believe it. And it is very unfortunate that a lot of people are such groveling statists that they will believe whatever the television tells them because they think they are virtue signaling in their commitment to institutions and order. That is qualitatively the same as some Nazi going, yeah, we were just following orders. It's qualitatively the same. Okay. You are groveling before the state because you want state power in correspondence with the global regime's agenda, and you are justifying it on claims toward the importance of institutions and order. Order is not more important than the preservation of human rights and natural rights. Order is not more important than sovereignty, and it is undignified for people who imagine themselves to be free to claim otherwise. And of course, the next argument is, well, institutions and order are necessary for the preservation of freedom. Are they? I'm not certain that's true. So anyway, you can see how this would be divided up, and maybe Hungary will get this little part and Poland will get this little part. For those listening, I put the map back up. But none of Ukraine has to exist. It could just all end up being Russia, by the way, which would be fine. If that's what the people over there want, why would that not be fine? What if these are just states? Now, I don't want the centralization. But if they have to centralize temporarily to fight back against the thing that's going on over here off screen and just down here off screen, then so be it. It's not my business what they do with Eastern Europe. The point is, we could see these countries being carved up to remove all of the lines that the global regime drew on the map. So let us go back to Truth Social and Donald Trump. And let me see if I can find this, because like a total dumbass, I have lost it once again, as I did yesterday. The same error 2 days in a row. That is quality television, folks. Is it television? Hard to say. Oh, man. I have to mention this, by the way. Donald Trump threw a real wrench in the system on I believe, Sunday. And this relates directly to one of the discussions we were having earlier about whether or not, about Mark Elias in discussing whether or not the voting should return to the way it was before, which means a rejection of the idea that the people should be constantly participating in popular votes to decide all of these things. Here is that post. Donald J. Trump on Truth Social. Oh, gosh. Pulled up the wrong screen. Here we are. There it is. The Democrats are fighting hard to get rid of the popular vote in future elections. They want all future presidential elections to be based exclusively on the Electoral College. Now, I don't know if he just did this to make people argue, and if he did, more power to him. I'm not sure exactly what he's talking about there, because what the Democrats have wanted to do is get states to agree within the states to base their electoral college votes on what the national popular vote is. And they would implement that after a certain number of states agreed. And they would, I guess, consider that as a de facto constitutional amendment, because they don't ever talk about amending the Constitution anymore. Why is that? Because they don't give a shit about the Constitution. The way they have set the Constitution up right now already allows them to do all the things they want to do in a way that cannot be reversed by appeals to the Constitution within the court system they have set up and the system of statutes, regulations, and legal precedent. So they've already gotten the Constitution to the place where they don't need to amend it. All right. We don't need to pretend that that is the original Constitution. It's proof right there that it isn't, based on the fact that they are able to do that whenever they need or want to do that. People should be horrified about that, but instead, they're like, you have to defend the Constitution. Whatever they call the Constitution, that is the Constitution, and therefore you have to defend it. What does that even mean? If they began calling the Holy Bible something else, like if they began calling one of the Harry Potter books the Holy Bible, and just did it over and 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 over, and they got rid of all the Holy Bibles and replaced them with Harry Potter books, after a generation or two, people would think that the Harry Potter book is the Holy Bible, and anybody who knew differently would no longer want to fight it. And then they would tell you that you have to abide by the morality expressed in the Harry Potter books and the spirituality expressed in the Harry Potter books. And anyone who said, what? That's not the Holy Bible. Like, I have a Holy Bible right here. You can see it. Everybody knows all the conversation about the Holy Bible throughout all of history was talking about this book right here and not the Harry Potter books. And people tried to enforce the Harry Potter book. You would live in an insane place. Okay, that would not make the Harry Potter book actually the Bible. And so if you take the Constitution and invert its meaning and distort it and reverse all of its power, taking it away, taking it from something that limits the abilities of what the state can do based on the preservation of the rights of the sovereign individual, and instead made it a document that allows the state to do whatever it wants, resistant to all appeal from sovereign individuals, and you are still protecting that Constitution, that would be like protecting the Harry Potter book as the Bible. No one would do that. And anyone who did it would be looked at as insane and immoral, yet we find ourselves doing exactly that. It is mind-blowing that anyone can claim patriotism at the same time that they claim to protect the Constitution in whatever it is now. So here is Donald Trump the other day. This is from Saturday, okay? This is after the march on Syria began, but hadn't concluded. Got to be very clear about the timing here. Now, as I said yesterday, there was a meeting in Astana, Kazakhstan in November. I want to find the document just so that I can put this up. Here it is. The Astana format. This is the Russian government here. This is the Astana format, and it lays out 12 November 2024, joint statement by representatives of Iran, Russia, and Turkey on outcomes of the 22nd International Meeting on Syria in the Astana format from Astana, Kazakhstan, 11-12 November 2024. 22nd International Meeting on this issue. And here they have the representatives of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Russian Federation, and the Republic of Turkey as guarantor countries of the Astana format. Here are all the agreements and acknowledgments. They lay out the entire case. We're not going to go through all this. Okay, but you can check this out. I'll drop it in the chat right now. I posted it in the info stream on Telegram on Saturday or Sunday. Telegram info stream is t.me/I'm your moderator. These are terms and conditions, details of the situation. Here's number 3, by the way. Let me just go through this quickly, just so you can see how some of this stuff connects. Acknowledge the negative impact of the escalation of violence in the Middle East on the situation in the Syrian Arab Republic. Underscored the urgency for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, UN agencies, and all humanitarian actors to develop an emergency response for those who were forced to cross from Lebanon into the Syrian territory following the escalation of hostilities in Lebanon. Condemned all Israeli military strikes in Syria. What? Consider these actions a violation of international law, international humanitarian law, and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria, and recognize them as destabilizing and exacerbating tensions in the region, and called for the ceasing of these attacks. Now, are we talking about the Israeli good twin or evil twin? And a lot of people are hearing this are probably like, there's no Israeli good twin, and maybe you're right, but you're probably not, you know? Regardless of how the state was formed or what the government of the state has represented and what its intelligence agencies have done, there are certainly people born in that territory who consider themselves rightfully Israelis. That is their heritage, regardless of any of the geopolitical concerns otherwise, or whatever the Jews have done. Okay. And so they can't all be evil. And to the extent that some of them actually just care about sovereign nationalism and want to move away from the global banking regime and think it's abhorrent what their intelligence communities have done, then they're every bit like us, okay? Because we can abhor all of those things about what the American government has done. And people will be like, yeah, but they did it on behalf of the Israeli government. Okay, but that just means we have a common enemy with the Israeli good twin, all right? They talk about the rejection of the occupation of the Syrian Golan, okay? So it's that region in Syria, the Golan Heights, same as they're going after in Lebanon. And I say that, of course, because we're going to look at a map in a little bit. Let me see if I can actually put up another map. Let's see if it gives me a good one here. Here, whatever. I'll just choose any of these old maps. So there is disputed territory in the border area. That is the key point here, okay? So we got this disputed area right here, the Golan Heights. Touches Jordan, touches Syria, touches Lebanon, and of course, Israel. So this is one of the important areas. And then the southern part of Israel, the West Bank, and the way out for the Gazans, as we were told, going into the Egyptian Peninsula, blah, blah, blah. Donald Trump on Truth Social. Opposition fighters in Syria, in an unprecedented move, have totally taken over numerous cities in a highly coordinated offensive and are now on the outskirts of Damascus, obviously preparing to make a very big move toward taking out Assad. Russia, because they are so tied up in Ukraine, and with the loss there of over 600,000 soldiers, and then he said 700,000 later the same day or the next day, seems incapable of stopping this literal march through Syria. a country they have protected for years. This is where former President Obama refused to honor his commitment of protecting the red line in the sand, and all hell broke out with Russia stepping in. But now they are, like possibly Assad himself, being forced out. And it may actually be the best thing that can happen to them, or what they agreed to. There was never much of a benefit in Syria for Russia other than to make Obama look really stupid. In any event, Syria is a mess, but it's not our friend, and the United States should have nothing to do with it. This is not our fight. Let it play out. Do not get involved. That's pretty clear. Do not get involved. But I want to focus on President Obama and the line in the sand, okay? And now I want to go divert off track a little bit with the Syria discussion, and we will probably have to continue the rest of it tomorrow, because I want to share this strange video that I saw the other day, and I'm going to maybe have to skip through it a little bit, because what we have is a deranged blue anon communist. Actually, I'll be nice to this commie, okay? He is a victim of the brainwashing and the total inversion, but at least he is paying attention to the words that the people are saying rather than just obeying the media. And again, probably just a delusional communist. And I'm not, at this point, it's very unlikely that he's going to make it, but redeemable communists are always welcome. Turn it around, commie. Turn it around. Here we go.
Clear now that the Democrats are signaling that something is coming, that they are going to take a stand and not just sit by and watch things happen without doing something. Yesterday, former President Barack Obama gave a speech at the Obama Foundation Democracy Forum. Listen to this part that caught my attention. Here it is.
What happens when the other side has repeatedly and abundantly made clear they are not interested in playing by the rules? It's a problem. And when that happens, we fight for what we believe in. There are going to be times, potentially, when one side tries to stack the deck and lock in a permanent grip on power, either by actively suppressing votes or politicizing the armed forces or using the judiciary, the criminal justice system to go after opponents. And in those circumstances, pluralism does not call for us to just stand back and say, well, I'm not sure. That's okay. In those circumstances, a line has been crossed, and we have to stand firm and speak out and organize and mobilize as forcefully as we can. But even in those circumstances, it's important to look for allies in unlikely places. And too often we assume the people on the other side have monolithic views, when in reality some of them may share our beliefs in sticking to the rules, observing norms. And that's why, when it's appropriate, there is nothing wrong with reinforcing and lifting up elected officials or voters, your neighbors, your friends, who you may not disagree with anything, but they do agree with you on that, because they may be able to exert influence on people they've got relationships with within the other party. So, none of this will be easy.
Did you notice how he would pause and make sure to be careful about what he says? He's the best at doing this, but he was very careful at what he was saying during this part of his speech. He is signaling that something is coming that's going to be significant and that is going to require all Americans to come together to stand up for what is right, for what is just, and for the truth. It's something so significant that it's going to require us to reach out to our opponents on the other side of the aisle and garner their support, which they should support. If they still stand up for right and wrong, which he's suggesting they do, then they will support what's coming. Between what Kamala has said lately, Cory Booker.
All right, boring. Okay, so something's coming. I mean, maybe that wasn't boring. Should we just let him?
And now Barack Obama, they are trying to subtly prepare everyone for what.
All right, so that's the end. So something is coming. I wonder if nothing can stop it. From that perspective, Obama is talking about joining together as a proud uniparty to oppose Trump and MAGA. Clearly, we're going to work across the aisle. He doesn't mean they're going to go be kind to MAGA. He means that they're going to find uniparty Republicans, all your neighbors who have the wrong opinions about things. As long as you can get them to continue with supporting the uniparty and the establishment on both sides, then they are your allies, not your enemies. Good. Wonderful to know. Claim all those Republicans. Please show us who they are. Donald Trump is doing an admirable job of showing us who they are. We are doing a piss poor job of listening to Donald Trump as he shows us that. Instead, we are contending that all of it is kayfabe and saying, no, they're still our friends. Clown show. Anyway, Obama mentioned a line, a red line. Don't want to cross it. Trump mentions it again in caps in his post. Of course, Obama's red line in Syria. So that speech was from Thursday. Trump says this on Saturday. Are these comms? I don't know. Could be. But in terms of the Syria situation, is being decided on levels that are not dependent on woke jihadists marching on Damascus. Hold for processing. I'm pulling up another map. To believe the central narrative on what just happened in Syria is utterly retarded as far as I'm concerned. And to figure out the smart version of that narrative is similarly retarded. Turkey and Iran and Russia had a meeting in Doha on Saturday, that same day, when Assad's regime falls. So, is it possible that the march on Damascus was the actual catalyst for quote unquote regime change in Syria? Or is there something else? Now, I would like to see if I can find, I have been checking this sporadically over the last couple of days to find out. Gosh, some of this stuff is just so funny. We're going to have to maybe give short shrift, unfortunately, to some of the aspects of this. Maybe I should search this on Yandex on some of this story, because some of it's just so ridiculous. If you think that the shooting of the healthcare CEO story is ridiculous, and it is, this story is equally as ridiculous, but people don't think that it possibly could be because of the relative importance of these geopolitical events when compared with the, largely irrelevant info op on a healthcare CEO being gunned down in the streets. I actually posted on that today on Truth Social, and I found it amusing, but I was actually a bit surprised to think that others found it so amusing too. And I'm often pleasantly surprised about those sorts of things because I assume that these things will be more triggering. But it's good that they're not, because that means people are leaving the kind of normie TV mind behind. I said, a guy you've never heard of is gunned down by another guy you've never heard of. There's video, so it must be real. Your task is to figure out exactly what happened using only the incoherent clues provided to you by the television. If you don't spend every waking moment on this until you receive a new assignment, something bad will probably happen. Now go. Get out there and solve this fake crime. Solve the fake news for us. Gosh, man, for whatever reason, my browser is not letting me pull up this result from Yandex. And Yandex, of course, is the Russian search engine that provides you all of the search results you're not allowed to see on regime browsers. Just give me the updated. It's giving me the same results. Could not be more annoyed. Okay. So anyway, the powerful countries that are guaranteeing, that are the guarantors of Syrian stability, met on Saturday to decide what happens in Syria. And then one of those countries offered for Bashar al-Assad to seek refuge to the extent that he needs it. And I know we've seen all the very violent pictures of how everything is going down there. Let's get to, I'm going to assume that you've all seen the basic central narrative. Actually, let's just put it on the record. I hate doing this because I'm conscious of people's time, but I'm also conscious of wanting to get these things on the record of the show so that they are here, because I do think of the show that way. And I think that people should think of these things that way. Like, you need to lay out a contemporary history that opposes in every way the false history, while taking that false history into account. Because it's not just fake news. This is fake news that will one day in the future be the history of this time. And people will look back on this fake news as the actual history of what happened. These will be the reputable sources in the event that the regime is able to continue their program in any significant way down the line, or that the people don't actually wake up and they still have a desire for these authoritative sources. So you have to create the counter narrative history of all that. Wikipedia already has a page for the fall of the Assad regime. And of course, every mainstream media outlet has the full central narrative on display. Here are the search results. I just looked up New York Times, Assad regime falls. The first piece is an opinion piece from the New York Times. Then we have Wikipedia on the fall of the regime. CNN with a wrap-up piece yesterday, what happened in Syria's civil war. Reuters, Syrians celebrated in Damascus as rebels stormed palaces. What to know about the fall of Assad, Syria in the New Yorker. The unthinkable has happened. What next? Why Syria's Assad regime is collapsing so quickly from foreign policy. That was last week. How did they know? Well, they knew because on Saturday there was a meeting to finalize whatever the next situation in Syria was going to be. And so they were claiming narrative high ground and trying to create the narrative storyline to explain what was already happening based on these countries choosing. Let's go to the CNN piece. I guess this is the best we're going to get of the central narrative today. After decades of brutal rule, Bashar al-Assad's regime has been toppled. Here's what you need to know. What happened? An armed rebel alliance charged across Syria over 11 days, sweeping through major cities and reigniting a conflict that had been largely static since a 2020 ceasefire agreement. A new rebel coalition led by the militant group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham launched a surprise attack and took control of Syria's largest city, Aleppo, on November 30th, a seismic move that met little resistance from the Syrian army. Syrian and Russian jets targeted rebels in Aleppo and Idlib, But opposition forces seized a second major city of Hama and quickly advanced on Homs, the gateway to the capital Damascus. As Homs fell, rebels encircled and marched into Damascus. Video showed prisoners being freed from Assad's notorious detention facilities. Rebels and civilians were seen ransacking the presidential palace, with footage revealing his luxurious lifestyle and large car collection. And now CNN has that on the front page. We'll bounce right back in a second. How about this? Israel, this is new. Israel bombs Syria and seizes territory as Netanyahu pledges to change the face of the Middle East. Let's go, Israel. Oh, man. So now they've moved Assad's cars. Anyway, he has all these luxury cars. Now, I have in the past, let me see if I can quickly find this. I've made fashion ads for the photos from the Afghanistan withdrawal. That old ridiculous info op, which is not to say that there were not real elements as heads explode. Just that what was displayed to us was an info op. You shouldn't need to look any further than the videos of the plane taking off, where some of those people, especially the effeminate Afghan boy waving his hands and smiling as he runs by the fake plane as people hang on the wheels and, oh, they're falling out of the sky. If that's the last plane out of Kabul, which it wasn't at all, planes just kept flying out and people are like, no, it was the last plane out. It's all real. The plane flew up into the sky and people were falling off to their death. They were holding on to the wheels, desperate to leave. No, they were smiling and running as the plane was taking off. But the plane wasn't a plane. It was a fake plane. There were all of these very well-shot photos that made it look very fashionable. This normal chick is just here with her iPhone. I better take a picture of these very brave rebels. Who are the rebels? Syria's rebel coalition is a new grouping called the Military Operations Command. It's made up of various Islamist and moderate factions who, despite their differences, are united in fighting the Assad regime, ISIS, and Iran-backed militias. Well, that can't be possible because they are ISIS, and the criminals they released from those prisons are ISIS, or at least so we're told. They're led by Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, the head of the militant group HTS, who has a complicated past. And here he is in his Volodymyr Zelensky look. Once bedfellows with Al-Qaeda and an apprentice of the future ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, al-Jalani has sought to distance his forces from the radical Islamism that his former allies pursued. He announced a split from Al-Qaeda in 2016 to create what he said was a Syria-focused anti-regime front with other local factions called Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, the Front for the Conquest of the Levant, which later changed to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or the Organization for the Liberation of the Levant. Now, ISIS, when they started being called ISIL, which Barack Obama loved, meant the Islamic State in the Levant. Let's just have a map break again. Okay, so let's get a good image here. Map of the Levant. Here is said Levant. Okay, so it encompasses Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, Cyprus. And that is quite a large area. Now, it's always worth keeping this in mind, that the Greater Israel Project, that old conspiracy theory, encompasses that area, but also some additional area. And to the extent that this is a real project that they are attempting to accomplish, one might wonder if ISIS and ISIL were global intelligence forces set up to begin taking over these areas. So the Levant is up here and Greater Israel goes across. Now, I cannot imagine Saudi Arabia is just going to give up that big chunk of land. So the idea that the Greater Israel Project is being implemented throughout all of these various, I don't know, changes that we are seeing, that is not persuasive to me. I think that something else is going on. And I believe that what we are seeing is the redrawing of lines to more correspond to what they would have been prior to the League of Nations and United Nations drawing the maps, and to potentially the creation of the regime proxy state of Israel. Now, if the regime proxy state of Israel can be extracted from the regime and run by the Israeli good twin in some sort of harmony with its neighbors, then who would we be to say that that country can't exist? It would be crazy to have some of the, more irrational hatreds of all the Jews and all the Israelis and all of Israel. And I'm not saying that to be in favor of that situation. Again, it's not up to me. I don't care how it works out, and I have no influence on that. I could say that I believe all of those maps should be reset, and then we can go work forward from there. Would that seem the most fair? Well, it would seem the most fair in the eyes of anyone who was alive 100 years ago, and maybe their ancestors directly, but to the people who have lived there in this actual lifetime, it's hard to say. I don't know, man. I think that these things are complicated, and I don't think that us weighing in, I mean, we certainly can weigh in. We can certainly have opinions, of course, but I'm not sure that it makes a ton of sense to declare that anyone who prefers peace to the writings of whatever perceived wrongs our ancestors might have is therefore somehow shilling for Israel or co-opted or compromised. I'm not sure that makes any sense. And that honestly sounds like you might as well go out and write the 1619 project. It gets to that point at some point. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's wrong. I mean, should we give Alaska back to Russia? Maybe. Should we give Hawaii to back to the Kingdom of Hawaii as it probably already is right now? Maybe. Let's also, damn it. Here's another map I want to show you. And maybe we're going to have to wrap it up and we can continue with some of this tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be the subscriber stream. So if you're just watching live on publicly available Rumble right now and you want to join for the continuation tomorrow, by all means, become a subscriber at imyourmoderator.substack.com, and you will get the link for the live stream tomorrow. And if you don't want to do that, then you can wait for this episode to become available, publicly available, which is fine. Not everybody has to become a subscriber. Not everybody wants to. Not everybody is able to spare the $5 a month. And I totally get it. As someone who lost his entire career in 2020, I know what it's like to have not the best financial times. So no worries. But if you want to watch live and you want to do this tomorrow, then that's the way to do it. So this is the map of Assad's 5 C's vision. And the abstract on this report on the 5 C's strategy from the Belt and Road Initiative quarterly publication. And again, you don't have to be for any of this. The Belt and Road Initiative is the Chinese initiative to connect the whole world. This is what the abstract of the report says. And hopefully, yeah, I still have the map on there. So keep an eye on the map. Think about this, and then we'll discuss, and then we'll delay the rest of it until tomorrow. Based on its cultural heritage and future vision, Syria launched the 5 C's initiative in 2004 with the intention of improving regional cooperation. This initiative triggered a plethora of new paradigms and terminologies that address several developments expected to influence both the Middle Eastern conflict theater and the international landscape, particularly in the period 2010 to 2011. After 9 years of war that served to undermine the 5 C's initiative, and upon the failure of the hegemony of global capitalism in its crude forms, it is now time to put forward a real alternative based on common interests between regional and international actors, which would respect regional diversity away from extremism. Since Middle Eastern countries share common problems, proposed solutions to these problems would be more effective if they were formulated and carried out collectively. Ultimately, development is the only way to bring peace to the Middle East, and a lasting solution to shared problems can only be achieved within the framework of peace through development. The combination of the 5 C's strategy and the Belt and Road Initiative would provide such a solution by reconstructing Southwest Asia and creating a network of infrastructures thanks to Syria's privileged geopolitical position at the intersection of the Mediterranean, the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea, the Caspian Sea, and the Black Sea. Full engagement with this combined strategy seems to be the best way to avoid another wasted decade for the majority of Middle Eastern countries. Okay? Bassam Abu Abdullah holds a PhD in international relations from the that's probably the Academy of Sciences of Uzbekistan University. He was a diplomat in the Syrian embassy in Turkey. Okay. So this guy at least knows what he's talking about and knows the variables. We cannot speak to his perspective, but he seems to be disappointed with the failure of the hegemony of global capitalism in the Middle East, if I can speak. And after 2 hours and 40 minutes, I probably cannot and should definitely wrap this thing up soon. But let's look at where these lines form on this map, okay? So you got Russia up here, bordering both the Caspian and Black Seas, critical to this project. You got Turkey, a major player, the gateway to Europe from Asia. Mediterranean Sea, Black Sea, controls travel along these routes, water and land. This runs through Egypt, bordering the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, through Jordan, through Syria, southeastern, through Iraq to the Persian Gulf, up into Iran, out to the Caspian Sea, and down toward, I guess that would be, if I'm not mistaken, the Indian Ocean. So this is a major project on this One Belt, One Road initiative. They're trying to connect all of these regions, ports, countries, etc. Now, if you look down here at the areas we're discussing, what you have here in Israel is this Golan Heights area and southern Lebanon and western Jordan. Now, I don't know this to be the case, okay? This is just a theory. I am watching patterns as they emerge in the world and speculating about what these patterns might be illustrating. Do not take this as anything authoritative, okay? I'm talking about a pattern here and suggesting something so that in the future, as reality begins to emerge, we can see whether or not that reality emerging maps onto this understanding or if that reality rejects this understanding. And that is all. Okay. But if we are talking about a two-state solution to Israel and Palestine, and we are told that Gaza and millions of Palestinians were fleeing to the south, we can imagine that these states would have certain interests. And if these lines were emerging in the world right now, and may well include, by the way, a canal along this border right here, the Ben Gurion Canal that goes out to the Mediterranean Sea. Is that what we're seeing emerge as Israel takes over these locations here? And is the global regime and its media giving us justifications to resist the redrawing of these maps, as the regional players might have chosen to redraw them? Because the way it's being explained to us would thereby benefit the global regime in its program and the agenda it has pursued for all this time in terms of the Greater Israel Project and whatever else. Benjamin Netanyahu, for as violent as he is being displayed in the media, and it's not to suggest there's no chance of that happening. I'm not here to support Benjamin Netanyahu's character in any way whatsoever. But I will say that the global regime has gone adamantly against him in the last couple of years after Netanyahu was an untouchable for our entire lifetimes. And why is that? Why have they tried to stack the judiciary in the Israeli government, in the Zionist Israeli government, against him? Why have color revolutions been launched to remove him? Why was he put why were people like Yoav Gallant and Benny Gantz and the rest of them put around him and held up as leaders who would be doing a better job than Benjamin Netanyahu will be doing? All of that suggests to me that the global regime wanted Netanyahu gone. Netanyahu has gone down to visit Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump very clearly took the upper hand in a very similar situation. Was that the submission of Netanyahu? Maybe. Maybe all of these power players, as the multipolar world order emerges, and as that sovereign alliance steps forward, and as these meetings are held, maybe they are deciding, hey, you know what? The state of Israel, as it emerges, gets that southern tip of Lebanon, and they get that that southwestern part of Syria and the Golan Heights. Maybe that's what the deal was. Okay. Maybe that's what the deal was. And there might be proof of this or a negation of this in the world, and I just haven't seen it because this isn't my primary area of focus. But when you see a map like that and you see the conflicts happening in all of these places, and you consider that, let me just bring that back up. If you want cooperation in a sovereign nationalist paradigm, then what you need to have is common interests. And when you have common interests, then you are more likely to cooperate. And if on one side of a critical trade route, you have Israel, and on the other side, Syria, you might be more likely to have cooperative relations between Israel and Syria. And the same is true of Jordan. The same would be true of Saudi Arabia and Lebanon and the rest. And if we are going to have a two-state solution for Palestine, and it seems like that is what's happening, again, regardless of anybody's feelings about these, I mean, who cares about people's feelings? They have no bearing on anything. All right. We're all able to express our feelings. And if you care about someone's opinion, then fine, that's your choice. But these things are not going to be decided based on people's feelings. Ultimately, we can be realistic and adult about that. These things are being decided by world powers, and they are probably rewriting and redrawing the maps that were created throughout the 20th century by the League of Nations, by the United Nations, by the global American hegemony. And we can feel good about that or bad about that. It doesn't matter. But they're going to redraw those maps as they see fit. And it seems like the way they see fit might want critical buy-in and stake, skin in the game by all of these countries because they have to cooperate on critical trade routes and critical, I guess this is encompassed in trade routes, but pipelines and energy resources and whatever else. And so we're seeing it in Europe, I think. We're seeing it in the Middle East, I think. It seems to me that whatever was decided was going to happen in Syria, and we'll probably just get an explanation of that, not from the media, but from the countries actually involved in guaranteeing the stability of the region. We'll probably get full explanations of all of this in the relatively near future. And I don't know if I'm going to be right about them, but it's going to be something that makes sense. It's not going to be that gay jihadis took over. And that is really what we have here. And first of all, an intelligence organization aligned with the global regime, probably going to be gay. I mean, they literally use homosexuality and proof of homosexuality as one of the means of compromise. So the fact that they are busy compromising people might indicate that they're involved with the gay stuff. And the fact is that their agenda is trying to turn people gay and trying to get people to trans their kids. The global homo thing is not a conspiracy theory. And eventually we'll get the results of that. And here we are, Telegraph UK on December 3rd. So this is a week ago, how Syria's diversity-friendly jihadists plan on building a state. It's not me saying it. Telegraph UK. I thought I had some of this highlighted. We don't need to go through it too much. I did have it highlighted, so this is very annoying. Let's just do the end here. In the initial days after the takeover of Aleppo, they have largely abided by their word, but questions remain on how integrated minorities can be in an HTS administration. In the past, Jolani has engaged with Christians and Druze in Idlib, and there is a Directorate of Minority Affairs within the Salvation Government, but they do not have representation within the government's General Consultative Council. Neither do women, but they are far more active and public in society in general. So they're just as bad as the people throwing gays off buildings. In fact, they are the people throwing gays off buildings. And surprise, they're also the gays being thrown off buildings. Just like here. It is not just minorities who might be fearful of coming under HTS rule. Doesn't genital manipulation by Muslims take on a whole new light in the age of genital manipulation by communists in America? Several activists have been imprisoned and tortured. In early 2024, a protest movement against Jolani's rule in Idlib erupted, with the leader accused of amassing too much power and acting tyrannically. In response, HTS created a complaints committee for all the area it controls, issued a general amnesty for non-criminal prisoners, and canceled residential building fees. It also formed a committee it claimed would help broaden the pool of people admitted to leadership positions. Under Jolani, HTS has transformed itself dramatically, splitting away from its explicitly jihadist roots. They're the good guys now, you see. This new stage might provide another platform for evolution. Certainly, the group's institution building over the past 4 years has positioned it well to consolidate battlefield victories into a much larger state-building project. But while it may be far more liberal than IS or the Taliban, Jolani and his forces remain at heart an authoritarian armed group. If they are to win support among distrustful locals and grudging acceptance from the watching West, they will have to make sure the plethora of bureaucratic initiatives launched in recent days are more than just a PR operation. Yep, they're going to have to make Syria gay again if they want continued help. And we're going to wrap it up on this and this right here. Hopefully, hold for processing. Yes, we're processing quickly here. Less holding, more processing. And now now we are good to go. Take a look at these. This is Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, a nonsense globalist organization that doesn't mean anything. The cruel Assad dictatorship has collapsed. This historic change in the region offers opportunities, but is not without risks. Europe is ready to support safeguarding national unity and rebuilding a Syrian state that protects all minorities. We are engaging with European and regional leaders and monitoring developments. So make terrorism great again, I guess. This is Ezra Cohen, but he is responding to Michael McFaul, a neocon. Assad was a horrible tyrant who slaughtered his own people for years and years. Experts can tell us what comes tomorrow, but today is a very good day. Celebrate the end of a barbaric dictatorship. And it's important to recognize that Assad used to have normal, cordial meetings with Nancy Pelosi and John Kerry. There are Q posts about that, showing those pictures. These pictures are not secret. You can find them anywhere. He was just the leader of Syria, and now he's a brutal dictator. He's been in power for too long. They don't care how legitimate the power is or how a person came to power. They don't care about how that person treats the people of his nation. They will make up how he does that. Oh, he's gassing his own people. He's poisoning his own people. Hey, Joe Biden did that when he mandated the COVID shots. That was poisoning his own people. That was coercing the people to involve themselves in a medical experiment, which is a direct violation of the Nuremberg Code. And they didn't care about that. They cheered it on and applauded it. Ezra Cohen says, it is a mistake to be celebrating the downfall of Assad. We should take the situation as it is. What comes next could be much worse for America. We must remain vigilant. So they are celebrating woke jihadis downstream from ISIS in their takeover of Syria. And strangely, also claiming responsibility for the takeover is one Benjamin Netanyahu. This is the National Pulse from, I believe, yesterday. Does it say on the National Pulse articles? I guess you just have to guess. Where's the date? Oh, December 9th. There we are. And we can go through some of this stuff and tomorrow, and then we'll move forward from there. But we're going to leave it for today. But to wrap that up, I think what we are seeing worldwide, and I've said this many times, is an unwinding of the 20th century influence of the global regime. And it happens to be the global Zionist regime. I didn't do that. That's just what it is. We are seeing the redrawing of maps as drawn by League of Nations, United Nations, other globalist organizations, a reversal of those priorities. We have to hope that along with the emergence of the multipolar order is some respect for sovereignty, which means a reversal of the World Economic Forum Great Reset agenda. Or, hey, man, it is also worth considering whether the Great Reset agenda, as it has been described to us in horrifying terms, is either a quote unquote white hat op. I love it. A white hat op to convince us that the technological advances and the way the world is changing right now are in our best interest, or it's a black hat op so that we will reject the way the world is changing and the technological advances and those changes. This is why it's so important, because, you know, they are almost indiscernible. They're kind of mirrors of one another. It's either one or the other. And it matters how people treat the world around them and interact and correspond to that world that might dictate which of those actually wins. So beyond everything else, it's important to understand it because we might not know. And that again suggests the importance of having objective standards, which means probably, to the irreligious and atheist and faithless, probably means abiding the word of God to the best of your ability and trying to get by in the world in a secondary fashion with the first thing as the priority, and then trying to take it from there and putting those objective judgments down, because it is hard to discern. It's possible that the global regime is advertising a dystopian future by walking down the correct path, and that the brainwashing that we've been subject to over however many decades makes us susceptible to that advertising, regardless of whether or not the proper principles are reflected in the direction we're moving. So it's a crazy psyop, man. It's less crazy when you compare everything to objective standards of right and wrong. And I think that's the only way forward. All right. So I am going to wrap this up for today. I do not believe that there are any Rumble rants there. And with that, subscriber stream tomorrow. Let's do that at, we'll do that one at 6 p.m. Eastern, because I haven't done an evening one for a while. I'll stick with that. Let's do, no, you know what? Sorry. I think that there's something I might have to do in the evening tomorrow, and I don't want to ruin that by going late on however long it takes me to put the podcast up. Let's do 3 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Okay. And then on Thursday, we'll be back with either a live stream or a produced podcast episode. I will be back tomorrow at, Thursday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Mask and lockdowns do not work. Joe Biden will never be president.
Well, what?
You know who I am, don't you?
Well, you ain't Fiona Apple, and if you ain't Fiona Apple, I don't give a rat's ass.
Ah!
And what's wrong with being an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times? What do you think, Max?
Do you want to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times?
Yeah, I think I'd like to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times.
You down.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
What?
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com. And for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon down on the range.